Free agency came and free agency went, and with it, many of our favorite players are now on different teams. And we're going to get into all that today. But since I mentioned our favorite players, might as well start with the New York Giants, who had one redeeming thing going for their offense last year. A fellow by the name of Saquon Barkley, one of the finest running backs in the league, shackled to the horrible Giants offense with Daniel Jones and that pathetic offensive line. He is shackled no more. He has gone from a bottom 5 quarterback to maybe a top 5 quarterback if he bounces back, and to the worst offensive line in the league to one of the best. Saquon Barkley is an Eagle. So Tristan, tell us how you feel about it now that I've done my hand movements.
Well, there's a few different ways to look at it. As a fan of Saquon Barkley for the past few seasons, the only bright spot I've had to look forward to watching, whether it be Sunday, Monday night, Thursday night, he's been the only fun thing to watch. So seeing him go and play for the Eagles, it's not something I exactly get excited about. But from an objective perspective, when we talk about the Giants being better in the future, I think, unfortunately, it was the right move for them, because you take a look at what they did with the money that they didn't spend on Saquon Barkley. They didn't spend it on a premium position like Xavier McKinney, who went in to play for the Green Bay Packers. They traded a second and a fifth to get Brian Burns, who is a high-end edge rusher. When you look at their edge rushers, and you're going to scoff, you're going to laugh at it, you're going to say, oh, look, Myles Garrett's getting paid less money than Brian Burns. TJ Watt's getting paid the same money. Nick Bosa's the only one who's getting paid more. And let me finish, because I have a point to this. When Myles Garrett and TJ Watt signed their contracts, their average annual value salary was 14 and 15% of the salary cap the year they signed. Brian Burns, at the time of signing his contract, it's around 12.5% of the salary cap this year. His salary, in comparison to the salary cap, it is less than when these players signed. At the time of signing, that is relevant to the conversation. You can't just look at, oh, he's making more than Myles Garrett. How is this possible? This is a travesty. So I think it is a very good signing. They were desperate for edge rusher help. Azeez Ojulari, Kayvon Thibodeau last season, they had the lowest pass rush win rate among edge rush duos out of the entire NFL. Azeez Ojulari can't stay on the field. Kayvon Thibodeau, he's been solid against the run. He's been an okay player, but he's not winning at a high level like you expect the 5th overall pick to do. So bringing in a pass rusher that can actually generate a pass rush, has a history of generating a pass rush at a high level, that was a good decision. Devin Singletary, not my favorite running back in the world, but bring him in at just $5 million a year, which
and then we can get to the running backs in a second. I'm talking about Brian Burns. First off, a top-tier edge rusher, really? He's not in the top tier of edge rushers. He might not be in the top 2 tiers of edge rushers. I can comfortably give you 10 people who are better. He certainly is not in that Myles Garrett, that Crosby, that Bosa tier. He's not close to that. So top tier, absolutely not. Can generate pass rushes and win rates and whatnot higher than what they got, still not among the best. Still not a particularly impressive double team rate when he bounces out there to edge. Paying him $150 million or whatever they wound up giving him, look, they're not going to pay him that entire contract. He will be cut eventually. It's the way the Giants do things. They get rid of their good players. But I don't understand it. What is the point of this? Those draft picks are going to be very valuable. You are not competing while he is on your roster. At the very least, in the next 3 years, it's not happening. You need to go find another quarterback in that time span. And while you do that, completely rebuild your offensive line and receiving core, and find a new running back now. He's going to help them be better this year. Their defense be better this year. They may be trying to win every game 9-6. I kind of respect that. I respect they're trying to play old school hard-nosed football, and playing in New York in the winter actually will do them some favors with that. Having a decent, even elite front seven will probably get them wins they don't deserve. But this is not some move for the future. This is a move to make them better now, and it just doesn't quite line up with the time. Obviously, you've got the money. They're paying someone. They're paying for an improvement, but this really does not move the needle one way or the other.
He certainly lines up with the timeline. I mean, we talked about this prior to the podcast. You can do this for a lot of teams. You can look at where they are currently, and if they make the right moves with their draft picks, if players on their roster develop, you could see a timeline within the next 5 seasons where they develop and they become not necessarily a Super Bowl contending team, but a playoff team that may win a wild card game or at least give people a run for their money. And I think the case can be made for I'm not saying this is going to happen. I've kind of been beaten into submission over how bad the Giants have been the past few seasons.
You're welcome for that, by the way.
And John Mara, I'm sick and tired of his ownership and the way he runs the organization. But you take a look at it, with Daniel Jones, they get off his contract after this season. That requires them then to find the right quarterback, whether it be at 6 overall this year. Darren Waller, probably gone after this season because with his hamstring, talks of retirement, he's not exactly worth his contract. And after this year, you can get him off the books and have a relatively low dead cap. That'll open up, I think, $30 million at dead cap when they get those off the book. And then you only have Brian Burns as the biggest contract on your books, plus the Dexter Lawrence contract. But you don't have much else to deal with. And Brian Burns does line up with their timeline because he's only 25 years old. It's not like they're signing a elite pass rusher like Danielle Hunter, who is 29 years old, because that certainly wouldn't line up with the timeline. He would just make them a little bit better over the next 2 seasons where they're not truly contending. But whether they go in the receiver direction this year and then try and find a quarterback next offseason and then pray behind Daniel Jones again, that's a path to maybe being successful.
If Daniel Jones is a Giant after the end of this season, I just feel bad.
No, there's no way he's a Giant at the end of this season, but like you said, there's a lot of roster holes. They need more wide receiver talent. They can't just rely on Darius Slayton, who's a good wide receiver 3, mid wide receiver 2, to be the wide receiver 1 every single year.
We don't need to get into these takes once again. We have beaten the drum over and over for years now about how bad the Giants receivers are. I do want to slowly...
I'm driving home a point.
Let me drive it for you. Let me get in the passenger seat and do a little cruise control here. The Giants are rebuilding. You agree with that, right?
I think anyone would take a look at where the Giants are and say that.
So they're paying $150 million to one player during a rebuild. I don't think it quite works.
A young player.
Not that young. But I'd say we got maybe 3-4 more years of prime play left. Then we get into that late 20s, early 30s window. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. The Giants are competing for the next 2 years. This contract is structured in such a way where he's going to make a large sum of money, be a hit against the cap, but it won't really cause him. They're not going to miss out on any players because of Brian Burns.
Exactly my point.
But
No.
they're not going to win games because of Brian Burns either. They just can't win, and Brian Burns is now a good football player on a terrible team. He's on the Panthers, but like 300 miles further north.
Oh, I don't think they're that bad.
Pretty close.
So what the Giants are going to do, Evan Neal is going to have to become a competent starter somewhere in the offensive line, whether he moves to guard or maybe year 3 has an Andrew Thomas jump over there at right tackle. That certainly would be nice. Will it happen? Who knows?
No.
But they're probably going, I think right now, receiver or quarterback at 6. And then if they don't take a quarterback this year, they need to find one next year. Because if that doesn't happen...
Sanders, come on down.
You're a Shador hater.
I'm a Shador realist. I was a quote-unquote Shador hater when they were 3-1. We saw that wound up. The Giants are going to be so bad. They're going to be so bad for the rest of our lives.
Well, at least they have a Super Bowl, 2 Super Bowls in my lifetime.
Good for you. You peaked. The top of the mountain is still there. Before we get into the top of the mountain for the Vikings, though, briefly touching on the Panthers, they are very clearly rebuilding. I think they've more so than the Giants are in the process of building things back up rather than tearing their roster down. The Giants still have major pieces they need to move off of, namely one major piece. The Panthers can only get better. A lot of people are blasting them for spending $100 million on a fringe top 10 guard who is a very good lineman, capable of catching passes out of the backfield, something you don't often see from the offensive guard position. I don't hate that move. I don't really hate anything the Panthers have done. I think getting Deontay Johnson is definitely a good move for the price. I think signing a strong interior offensive lineman, even for the price, is a good move. I think the Panthers are moving in the right direction. They're building things back up, and they have no incentive to move off of anyone else. Also, they were never going to pay Brian Burns. Talking about timelines, he was not going to work in Carolina.
The whole Brian Burns thing is just unfortunate, considering the fact they could have gotten 2 first-round picks for him a few years ago from the Rams when they were trying to desperately make another push. Good thing for the Rams they didn't wind up doing that.
Well, if they do that, maybe they do make another push. How much further do we think the Rams make it in the playoffs? So they got another...
That was the year they were bad, though.
I know, I'm saying, but if they've got another elite pass rusher to play with Aaron Donald. We saw what he did with Ndamukong Suh.
Oh, so now he's an elite pass rusher.
Well, anyone's an elite pass rusher next to Aaron Donald, unless, of course, you're those Mickey Mouse DNs they keep lining up.
But as a Panthers fan, it probably does sting a little bit looking at the Bryce Young trade, then looking at what you missed out on when it comes to Brian Burns. And I agree. I think signing the guard was a good move. I think trading for Deontay Johnson, considering they didn't give up a bunch, gives them an actual receiver that can win on the outside. So Bryce Young has someone to throw to besides Adam Thielen winning against zone coverage and settling down every so often.
I don't know which side Hunt's going to play on. They've got a lot of holes all over the place. If they can get him and Ike Ekwonu, particularly if Ike plays like he did his rookie year on the same side, that's a running game right there. If the left side of their offensive line is built around those two, they're in business. They have a little something to cook with. That offense might not be so bad. Speaking of offenses, though, the Atlanta Falcons went out and signed Kirk Cousins to a 4-year, $180 million contract. Keep in mind, Kirk Cousins, of course, has said multiple times it was not about the money. Not to be a hater, it appears to have been about the money. Now, the Atlanta Falcons have a competent quarterback for the first time since Matt Ryan. And they've got a loaded offense. They've got a good offensive line, 2 really strong receivers who have never quite been fully capitalized on, and Bijan Robinson. If the Falcons do not win the NFC South this year, something has gone horribly wrong. The Achilles did not heal right, Kirk got hurt again somehow, or all their defenders blew out their big toes. They are the favorite to win the NFC South now. They are the best team in that division. They have instantly given themselves an elite offense based off the sheer overwhelming amount of talent. And really, I like this move for the Falcons. I like it more for the Vikings, though, because Kirk Cousins is no longer on my team.
For the Falcons, it makes sense because they have young talent now that they're not paying a lot of money. Eventually, they'll have to pay someone like Bijan Robinson and Drake London and Kyle Pitts. But their offensive line is very good. Kirk Cousins goes from maybe potentially being the worst quarterback in the NFC North next year to being the best quarterback in the NFC South this year. I mean, you're going to have what? Derek Carr, Bryce Young, Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield.
Baker Mayfield's good, and especially coming off that Achilles injury, Kirk Cousins might be worse, but there's much less competition he's going to have to deal with within the NFC South. Much greater chance at making the playoffs. I mean, in the NFC North, the Packers are going to be really good. We know the Lions are good. The Bears with Caleb Williams
are not going to be that good.
Who knows there?
I got a good feeling. About the Bears. Also, the Packers are going to be very good. Please. You're the only person predicting them to win the Super Bowl. They peaked out. If you want to talk about the NFC North, I'm going to talk about the NFC North. All due respect to Kirk Cousins, had immaculate vibes during the regular season. Upstanding individual, gave a lot to the community, beautiful wife and kids. Couldn't be happier he's on another team. I couldn't be happier. I have pounded this table with a Let It Snow tablecloth on it for years saying, look, Kirk is a great regular season quarterback who automatically raises your floor to roughly 7 or 8 wins if he's healthy. He is never going to win a Super Bowl. I don't think he's got the intestinal fortitude, the stones to win a Super Bowl. I think when the lights get a little bit too bright, Kirk Cousins shrinks from the moment. Check down on 4th and 8 when there's an open receiver deep if he forced it. He's not that guy. You could stick him on the 49ers, he wouldn't be that guy. I am glad he's gone. This gives the Vikings the opportunity to move into a new era while already having the roster built. They are in all likelihood, going to trade up and get a rookie quarterback. Whether that is Jaden Daniels, whether that is J.J. McCarthy, whether that is Drake May. If the negative PR surrounding Drake May has somehow gotten bad enough, he slips to say the 5th overall pick, the Vikings are going to strike at that in a sec. They're going to be able to bring a rookie quarterback into the best possible situation, and even if they make the decision to sit him for a year and let him develop, they have Sam Darnold, who is on by far...
Sam Darnold, woo!
who is in by far the best situation of his career if he is named the week 1 starter. Obviously, the 49ers were good, but he never had a chance to actually get the full-time reins and first-team reps, competing against Trey Lance and sitting behind our good pal, Brock Purdy. He'll be a decent bridge quarterback for the first half of the season if it really comes down to it. But the Vikings are in a great spot. All they need to do now is extend Justin Jefferson, and they will be a perennial contender within the next 2 seasons. Assuming, of course, this is the biggest assumption I'll throw out there. Whatever quarterback they draft needs to not bust terribly. If he busts all over the place on the screen, on the field, in the weight room, if he just starts busting, they're screwed. But that's the case with any team drafting a quarterback. That's the case with the Bears. That's going to be the case with the Patriots. The rebuild is completely scrapped if you don't hit on the quarterback position, which the Vikings historically have not. But there's a law of averages here. So all those misses are leading up to a banger franchise quarterback in the draft.
I'm sure you're a very successful gambler.
I'm a very successful gambler. I am not one of those 90% who quit right before they hit their 12-leg parlay.
It makes sense why the Vikings are moving off of Kirk Cousins, because they have Justin Jefferson, who they now have to give a big contract to. They're already paying TJ Hawkinson a lot of money. Jordan Addison, with the way his rookie year went, they're going to have to pay him down the line. They have the talent on offense to make things happen. They don't need a $47 million quarterback to win games. I mean, we saw last year Kevin O'Connell win some games with Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins.
Did not win any games with Nick Mullins. I'm going to stop you right there. Unless you want to count the game he came in at the second half of the Raiders and scored 3 points. He did not win games with Nick Mullins.
Did they win the game? Did they win the game?
He won a game, singular. Won a game with Nick Mullins.
Well, I'm talking about Kevin O'Connell winning games with a backup quarterback.
I'm just saying, let's not talk about Nick Mullins.
He made the offense function with quarterbacks that aren't really starting caliber quarterbacks in the NFL. So I think Sam Darnold, I mean, he's not really starting caliber quarterback anyway.
To be fair, you do not get a good read of that on the Panthers or the Jets. I kind of agree with you, but we don't know.
With the talent they have, Kevin O'Connell, Sam Darnold, they'll win some games, but when it comes to long term, if they don't get the quarterback right this year, they're in a much better situation than the Giants. And like you said, it's like any team that drafts a young quarterback. But if they don't get it right this year, if they don't get it right next year, if that's when they decide to draft a quarterback,
they draft
we're gonna see the general manager gone. Kevin O'Connell's gonna be without a job, and it's going to be another rebuild for the Vikings.
They're not gonna fire KOC. And here's the deal with the general manager. He is getting a lot of crap right now from the Kirk Cousins homers because of the dead cap hits and whatnot. So Vikings are gonna have $150 million in cap space next season. That will be, I believe, the most in the NFL, maybe the second most. They are going to have an unfathomable amount of money.
And then they can sign Russell Wilson.
Any free agent they want. Also, if you want to talk about going after free agents, walking into the Packers locker room, yoinking their chain in Aaron Jones and running off with it. I am a big fan of that. That solves the biggest issue the Vikings offense had. They now have a good running back. If they can pair that with Ty Chandler and make that work out, they are in business. That is a good line, and now it has a great runner of the football and a great receiver out of the backfield to go with it. No more Alexander Mass.
Well, hopefully he can stay on the field because he has struggled with injury over the past few
seasons. Showed he is willing to fight through injury towards the back half of the season. He was the reason that Packers offense was so dominant down the stretch and beat the brakes off the Cowboys in the playoffs. That and Jordan Love cooking. But since we're talking about Green Bay, I'm not a fan of the Xavier McKinney contract. I think that is a bit large given how good of a player he is. Granted, given how bad the Giants' pass rush was, I think it's hard to get a good read on how he truly is in the cornerback. If the Packers
highest graded safety per PFF.
Yeah, of course, our lords and saviors at PFF. They hold much weight in my decision making. If you care about PFF grades, folks, I got some snake oil I'd like to sell you. You pair that with a better defense, I'm okay within the grand scheme of things. New cap space, it's a fine deal. It's a bit of an overpay, but everyone's getting overpaid these days.
I actually really like what the Packers did, and I think they got better because, I mean, they added Jacobs, who I think is more dynamic than Aaron Jones.
Saying more dynamic is like saying Aaron Rodgers is more athletic than Tom Brady. He's got a higher chance of explosive plays, but he's not consistently better.
And with Xavier McKinney, you have the money to pay a safety right now because all of their offensive talent, whether it be quarterback, whether it be their 4 young receivers, you're not getting paid, so you have the ability to pay a safety. So I think that is a smart decision in the window they're currently in. Now, when it comes time to pay some of the other guys, he's someone that maybe gets traded, cut, released. Despite how good he is, safety can be a luxury position. So I actually like both those signings.
Jacobs is not a substantial upgrade over what Aaron Jones was. And the fact that
it's really only 1 year guaranteed, by the way.
If they're clearly trying to do something in their backfield and make it better, they would not have asked Aaron Jones to take a 50% cut in his contract or be cut. He was making $12 million. They told him, hey, you either come down to $6 million or you're off the team. They could have kept him at $8 and $9 million. The Vikings only paid him $7 million. I think that was a pretty bad move by the Packers. They could have had the best rushing duo in the NFL with those two, but chose to be cheapskates. If they've got money, they might as well spend it. Speaking of teams making big splash moves in the running back market, a certain New York Giants legend has bounced on over to the city of brotherly love. He's got family in the area, went to college in Pennsylvania. A lot of very happy Eagles fans out there, as they should be. If Saquon Barkley can stay on the field, which he did behind that terrible Giants offensive line last season, he is going to be just fine in Philadelphia. Behind that elite offensive line, we might be witnessing rookie Saqon again. It is a special time in the city of brotherly love. Now, if they just get an offensive coordinator, that's the issue. they can make that work.
The thing is that I do think it is going to be the most efficient year of Saquon Barkley's career. People have made the argument, well, why did you just stick with DeAndre Swift? The running game wasn't the issue. Adding a running back like Saquon Barkley makes your offense more dynamic, and he had Saquon's yards per carry wasn't that great behind that Eagles offensive line, with receivers to actually take some of the attention off of him, a quarterback to take the attention off of him, a tight end to take the attention off him. He's going to have the most efficient season of his career by far. I think that's not even a question at that point. You go from an offense where you were the only focal point to an offense where there's other pieces around you. It's good for him, and it's good for his stat sheet and the numbers he's capable of putting up. With that being said, when it comes to the Eagles, the team, and this may be a bit of a cope because Saquon's playing on the Eagles.
It's a big cope.
It doesn't move the needle for them winning a Super Bowl. It just doesn't. I mean, you look at what was wrong with them last season. It was Nick Sirianni completely losing the locker room after they lost one game. It was their offensive coordinator being horrible.
He was unemployed now, by the way.
Maybe Kellen Moore fixes that. He didn't exactly succeed at a high level with the Chargers. Granted, Justin Herbert did get hurt, so there is that out there. And Vic Fangio, is he going to be able to fix the Eagles defense, which was not so good last season? I mean, they did add C.J. Gardner-Johnson to the secondary, which hopefully will improve it. They need to get the coordinators right. They need to not lose the locker room, and they need to fix that secondary if they're going to be making a Super Bowl push. A more efficient Saquon doesn't fix any of those things.
Yeah, it sure helps the offensive coordinator job out. Having one of the finer rushers in football behind a great offensive line will, in fact, do you some favors. And we got to call out DeAndre Swift hater here. I'm not. I think he's a above average NFL running back. But when you go from maybe the 12th or 13th best running back to someone you could argue is in the top 3 behind an elite offensive line, you have all the potential you need for a special rushing attack there. You don't need some offensive genius, some Sean McVay, some Andy Reid to guide that ship. Madden could guide that ship and have it be a more efficient offense than what it was last season. They're going to be just fine. You are a hater to the core.
Talking down on a dead man?
I'm talking about the game, you scumbag. You degenerate, you reprobate. This is why Saquon Barkley didn't go to the Giants. He knew there were fans like you out there who just give him and his family and his people a bad name. Shout out to all those people, Tiki Barker included, saying Saquon is dead to them. You were going to get Saquon Barkley killed anyway if you made him run by that offensive line for another season. It is practically medical malpractice to send someone who has dealt with injuries in the past out behind that pitiful unit. What happened to shame? What happened to decency? What happened to our society?
The bigger problem there is that they don't have the receivers and they don't have the quarterback to take attention off of him. It's even more so than the offensive line. It wouldn't have mattered if they had Jerry Rice and Randy Moss lining up outside of him. With Daniel Jones throwing the ball and that offensive line blocking the way it did, he was cooked. Keeping the trend going of running backs, Derrick Henry has gone to the Baltimore Ravens. And some people are saying, oh, well, you got Lamar in the backfield and your running backs were efficient anyway, so what does that matter? The reason the Ravens were not in the Super Bowl this year is because they completely abandoned the run in the AFC Championship game. I can assure you, if Derrick Henry is healthy, playing in the playoffs, they are not abandoning the run until they are down by 4 touchdowns, which will never happen given how good their defense is. Even without Patrick Queen, still one of the best units in football. But now, they can just pound you to death on the ground over and over again. We have seen how good Derrick Henry gets when his carries go up as the season goes on, as he gets accustomed to running into a defense time and time again. That is so on brand for Ravens football. There is no better Ravens running back I can imagine than Derrick Henry. Big, muscular, perfect fit, wants to go out there and take your lunch money, isn't going to dance around you, is going to put his arm in your face and dribble you. He is the perfect Ravens running back. You pair that with Lamar Jackson, a dynamic rusher in his own league when it comes to guys running out of the backfield as quarterbacks, and you have the best rushing attack ever. Plain and simple. Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley have made excellent career decisions because they were behind bad offensive lines, and then they go and play for teams with good offensive lines. The Titans, they had some of the worst yards per carry from their running backs last season before first contact. The Ravens, among the best. They have 1.8 yards per carry before another person on the defense even touches them. And what have we always said about Derrick Henry? All he needs is to get a little bit ahead of steam, and then he has the potential to take it for a touchdown. The only way to stop Derrick Henry is to hit him in the backfield. He gets 5 yards down the field, or 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, good luck stopping him. And this is the best chance he's had at any point in his career, any point with the Titans to do that. And you have
some pretty good blocking at Alabama.
In college, okay.
He's had in his career, and he certainly was making money in college, but roll tide.
And
baby.
you have the greatest rusher of the football at quarterback lining up in front of you or next to you, depending on the formation.
Potentially behind you.
Maybe. I mean, Derrick Henry does throw some passes.
That is the package. The flea flicker, then going back to Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry handing off to Lamar, who flea flickers to him, who throws to an open Mark Andrews. Harbaugh, you just heard it right here. Someone send the clip this, make this the clip for the podcast. We have developed the perfect trick play to get the Ravens a touchdown at least once. But you have touched on something very important. This opens up their offense to a great degree because they will stick multiple tight ends, multiple running backs in the backfield at a time. They can put a receiving back out there to pair with Derrick Henry, where other teams might say, maybe we don't want to run two running backs at the same time. It will compromise our receivers. Ravens have no issue putting three guys in the backfield. This will be a creative offense, a dynamic offense, an offense which is almost impossible to game plan given how good Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews are in the passing game. I think we both agree that if not, well, I'm going to say the Ravens should be the current favorites to win the AFC based off this move.
We'll have a 300-pound fullback blocking for Derrick Henry.
Pat Ricard, oof. Can't forget about him.
And then you got Derrick Henry running at you. It's going to be a lot for a defense to handle. And, well, the Chiefs, I think they're probably still the favorites. I'm not going to...
Oh, well, the Chiefs are still a favorite. Boo. Coward. Sticking to your guns. They're not three-peating. They're not getting all their cornerbacks back. The Chiefs are not winning the Super Bowl next year, man. Come on.
So, real question is, are the Steelers making a Super Bowl push with Russell Wilson on the vet minimum?
I got a bone to pick with you on that, actually. You are being outright dismissive of the Pittsburgh Steelers in a TikTok.
Woo, they're going to win 10 games and lose in the wild card.
And they can make it to the divisional round. But look, I understand why Mike Tomlin does this because I'm pretty sure that if he has one season under 500, he's going to get fired, which is a ridiculous thing to say, even though it might be the right move. You have to give him credit for perennially being good. That offense is going to be better even without Johnson out there catching passes. If they do anything with the O-line or receiving core in the draft, they'll probably, they'll win 11, 10 games, something like that. Make the divisional round, play competitive football. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, the reason they traded Johnson is probably because they're going to make a move for Jonnu Smith and then roll out Jonnu Smith, Darnell Washington.
You scoff at that. Jonnu Smith was a beast last year in Atlanta.
They're going to roll out 3 tight end sets and then George Pickens on the other side of the field.
George Pickens will not be getting that ball. George Pickens, it's a good thing you can run block, man.
Well, he doesn't even run block anymore.
Well, he's taking off. He knew last season was a wash, but Arthur Smith is going to do miracles. Also, the Patrick Queen signing, given how much someone like Tremaine Edmonds is making, which may be a bad example because I think that's one of the worst linebacker contracts in the game right now, but Patrick Queen, Pro Bowler, very good player, contributed highly next to Roquan Smith, the best linebacker in football not named Fred Warner. I think that's a pretty good move, particularly the contract they got him on. That's going to make their defense better. They didn't have particularly strong linebacker play or pass rushing from anyone besides TJ Watt last year, and Patrick Queen can rush a little bit.
It makes the strength of their team even better, so I think it's a good signing. I mean, you're not going to get a better, as much as we make fun of Russell Wilson, you're not going to get a better deal than Russell Wilson on the vet minimum while the Broncos are still paying him $40 million. So even though I make fun of them perpetually being stuck at 8 to 11 wins next season and losing in the wild card.
Not stuck at 8, stuck at 9.
9. You are right with the 17 games now. They are still going to be a solid team. Their defense is always good. Their offense should be better with Russ, you would hope.
Here's the thing. I think it's more so it'll be better with an entire offseason. 1, building the line. 2, not having Matt Canada there. Whether Kenny Pickett or Russ wins the starting job, the quarterback play and the offense in general is going to be much better.
You would hope.
Heading on over to the AFC South, the Jacksonville Jaguars are making some peculiar moves. They traded for Mac Jones to be Trevor Lawrence's backup, maybe the starter if he gets hurt again. They signed Ezra Cleveland from the Minnesota Vikings on a contract which is far too large considering how bad Ezra Cleveland is. And they have gone out and signed Gabe Davis. Former Bills great, Gabe Davis. Great of one game. I don't think these are the moves you make. Given the AFC South's weakness that the Jaguars are playing in a division where the Titans are rebuilding and the Colts still don't know if they have the answer at quarterback yet, and they just lost Gardner Minshew, so if they don't have the answer, they're really in trouble. They can probably still cruise to 9 wins and maybe sneak in the wild card, maybe win the division. They're not beating the Texans, but they'll be in an all right spot. But these are not the moves a team trying to build a championship team makes. These are the moves you make to stay above water and to spend your money since you have it.
I don't think Gabe Davis is a horrible move. I mean, if they retain Calvin Ridley and they have Calvin Ridley and Gabe Davis on the outside, and then you have Christian Kirk in the slot, and you have Evan Ingram, who has been very good now late in his career with the Jaguars, and you have Travis Etienne in the backfield, and you're able to keep building that offensive line, and hopefully Trevor Lawrence finally has his big year.
I want to talk about this too, since you are one of the Trevor Lawrence haters. He actually was pretty good the first 11 weeks of the season. Had the Jaguars winning, was on pace to throw for 4,300 passing yards, which will have been top 5. Pretty good touchdown to interception numbers, at least the low end of the interception numbers, but he was not playing bad. He was doing things on the ground. Once that ankle and that knee gave out, he lost all of his athleticism and couldn't do anything, but the Jaguars were on pace to be a 12-13 win team before things really went south for them. They went south, though, because Trevor Lawrence kept getting hit and kept getting hurt, and they are not building that offensive line in a healthy manner.
Well, Christian Kirk also got hurt, which didn't help.
Their tackles still stink. Ezra Cleveland, unless something changes in Florida, that no state income tax maybe does wonders on his mindset, it's not going to work out. Their O-line is still their weakness, and you can put as many skill players out there. You can put as much nice paint on a car as you want. If it's got a decade-old engine, it's still not going to run that well. Or 2-decade-old, it's still not going to run that well. Until that team fixes their offensive line, Trevor Lawrence is going to keep battling with injuries, and they're still never going to be special on offense. Keeping things in the AFC South briefly, Danielle Hunter has signed with the Texans for 2 years, $50 million. Really good contract for the Texans, getting a very high-end edge rusher on a 2-year deal given his age. It's okay to pay him as much as they are. It's a bit of an overpay, but given how short the contract is, it's not that big of an issue. You now have Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter lining up on opposite sides of the line from each other. That is going to be a bad day for a lot of quarterbacks. That is one of the best pass rush duos in the NFL. If Anderson develops the way I think he's going to, that is a scary thought for the next 2 seasons.
It's not an overpay because of what they have on the roster. You're not paying Will Anderson a ton of money. You're not paying CJ Stroud a ton of money. Your receivers, you're not paying them a ton of money. I think Dalton Schultz may be making the most money on that offense when it comes to skill positions. So I
personally view Laramie Tunsil as very skilled, but I get what you're saying.
They're not paying anyone, so you have the ability to pay Danielle Hunter, especially you get him at 29 years old and 30 years old, still towards maybe the end of his prime. He's not that old yet. You hope he still has most of his elite athletic ability, so I think it's a very good signing. But the most important question we have to ask ourselves, and to end off this video, is what is going to happen to the Browns quarterback room when Jameis Winston starts cracking jokes about Massage Watson and how he prepares for games? What is going to happen to that locker room?
There has never been a quarterback room which has respected women less than what's going on in Cleveland right now. And you're making those jokes. You realize Jameis Winston has some accusations himself, right? This is going to sound really bad considering what we just said. That is 100% a morale/character signing. Say what you want about Jameis off the field. Not a particularly good human being by a lot of measures. He has been popular in every single locker room he has been in. You can just see that based off the Jamal Williams thing of last year. That made him very popular in the Saints locker room. They clearly liked him a lot more than Derrick Carr, given half the roster chose to scream at Carr at some point that year. And he was popular in Tampa Bay even while throwing interceptions. Jameis Winston will be liked, will be a unifying force, and is probably an improvement over some of the backups they could have. They were never getting Joe Flacco back, considering the type of performance he had. He's going to go get a high-paying backup job somewhere, which the Browns cannot afford given how much money they're spending on Watson. It's a good move, but dear God, that's horrible optically. If you are still here, you are already subscribed, I am almost sure of it, but please like the video, share it to all your social media platforms, not TikTok anymore because that one's on its way out again. Shout out to the House, shout out to the Senate, shout out to President Biden. We will see you next week.